He thought it was just a kind act, but the next day, a black SUV arrives with a shocking truth. Hello everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more meaningful stories. The sun beat down mercilessly on the empty stretch of road. Stretching endlessly ahead, John tapped his fingers anxiously on the steering wheel, his mind racing with thoughts of an important meeting that was fast approaching. His luxury SUV roared along the rural road, cutting through the heat like a knife. Then, with a jarring bump, the unmistakable thump of a flat tire filled the air. Of course, he muttered under his breath, his frustration mounting. This was just perfect. He cursed softly, pulling over to the side of the road as the SUV kicked up a cloud of dust. Stepping out, the heat hit him like a wave, and he winced, adjusting his suit jacket and loosening his tie. The tire was shredded, the rubber peeling away in tatters. He glanced at his phone, no signal. The road was desolate, just him, the broken-down SUV, and the sweltering heat. No assistants, no chauffeurs, no service crews, just him, stranded and helpless. He sighed, pushing back a memory of a time when he'd been in a similar situation. A younger version of himself stranded and ignored by those who passed him by. It left a bitter taste in his mouth, a reason he hated relying on others. He needed to solve this, and fast, before the day slipped away into dusk. Suddenly, something caught his eye. A figure appeared on the horizon, drawing closer. A kid, no older than 14, wearing a faded t-shirt and worn sneakers. As the boy neared, John noticed the determined look in his eyes. "Hey, mister, got trouble with your car?" the boy called out, stopping a few steps away. His voice was clear and direct, and his gaze was sharp and curious. John hesitated, relief and caution warred within him. "Yeah, flat tire," he replied, trying to keep his voice level. "I don't exactly know how to fix it." The boy nodded confidently, taking in the shredded tire and glancing back at John. "I can do it. My dad showed me how," he said, kneeling down to inspect the tire. "Do you have a spare?" John asked, still not fully trusting the situation. The boy's face broke into a small smile. "Yeah, it's usually under the back. Mind if I take a look?" John, with no other choice, stepped aside, uneasy but desperate. The boy opened the hatch, found the spare tire and tools, and immediately set to work without hesitation. His hands moved swiftly, tightening bolts and loosening lug nuts with ease. John stood there, unsure of what to do with his hands, his eyes on the boy who was working with the precision of someone far older than his years. "Really doing this?" John muttered to himself, his unease growing. Sweat trickled down his back from the relentless heat. But it wasn't just the weather that made him uncomfortable, it was the complete lack of control. For a man used to calling the shots, relying on someone else, especially a kid, was an unfamiliar and unsettling feeling. The boy looked up briefly, sweat beading on his forehead. "You all right there, mister? You look a little pale," he said with concern. "I'm fine," John replied, straightening up and adjusting his suit jacket. He didn't know why, but he felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't for years. With a few final turns of the wrench, the boy stepped back, a satisfied grin on his face. All done. John blinked in disbelief. The tire was fixed, and the boy was standing there, waiting for him to acknowledge the work. Reaching into his wallet, John pulled out a few bills, offering them to the boy. "Here, for your trouble. I appreciate it." But the boy shook his head, backing away. "Nah, I don't need that. Just wanted to help. You seemed like you could use it." John stood there for a moment, stunned, the money still in his hand. He felt a strange mix of gratitude and confusion. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low. "Yeah, it's no big deal," the boy said with a wave, then turned and started walking back down the road. John watched him go, his mind racing. No thanks, no demands, just a simple, genuine act of kindness. Something about it unsettled him. It wasn't the boy's actions, it was his own reaction. What was he supposed to do with this? With a final glance at the boy disappearing down the road, John let out a long, heavy sigh. The unease hadn't left him. In fact, it had only deepened. He slipped the money back into his wallet, climbed into the driver's seat, and started the car. As he pulled back onto the road, he found his thoughts drifting to the boy, to the kindness he had shown without any expectation of anything in return. John's grip tightened on the wheel as he glanced into the rearview mirror. watching the boy's form shrink in the distance. His thoughts were clouded, unsettled, as if something had shifted inside him. He had just witnessed an act of pure generosity, a reminder that perhaps he had been focusing on the wrong things all along. John couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered after his encounter with the boy. As he pulled into his driveway, the familiar hum of the automatic gate opening did little to calm the storm swirling in his mind. The sleek, modern house loomed before him, the kind of place that appeared perfect from the outside, yet felt strangely cold inside. He parked the SUV, the engine's rumble fading into the silence, but the unease in his chest only deepened. Inside, the atmosphere was anything but warm. His wife, Clara, greeted him with a curious glance. "You're late," she said, her voice soft but laced with expectation. John didn't even have the words to explain what was going through his mind. The boy, the way he had helped without a second thought. The way he refused any reward, it gnawed at him. "It's that kid," he said slowly, rubbing his forehead as he sank into a chair at the dinner table. "The one who helped me with the flat tire. He wouldn't take any money. Just did it like it was the most natural thing in the world. And then he just walked off like it was no big deal." He leaned back in his chair, frustration edging into his voice. "I don't get it. I can't stop thinking about it." Clara, ever the pragmatic one, raised an eyebrow. "What kid?" "The one who fixed the tire," John replied, his eyes distant, as if replaying the whole scene in his head. He was so calm, so sure of himself. "I don't know. I just don't understand why someone would help without expecting anything in return." Their daughter, Ellie, looked up from her phone. Her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean? He didn't even want money?" John nodded, his mind still racing. "Yeah, it was just so different. I don't know if it's because I've never had to rely on anyone before. Or what, but it bothered me. I mean, who does that?" His son, Josh, smirked. "Maybe it's because you don't actually know how to fix a flat tire." "Dad," John chuckled weakly, but the unease was still there. He stood up abruptly, his mind made up. "I'm going back. I need to find him." Clara didn't stop him, she just looked at him with a mixture of understanding and concern. "All right, don't stay out too late," she said softly, watching him grab his keys and head out the door. The drive back to the desolate stretch of road was quieter this time. The once foreign feeling of helplessness he'd felt when his tire went flat seemed strangely familiar now. Like it had cracked open something in him he hadn't realized was there. He remembered the boy's eyes, so direct and clear, the lack of hesitation in his movements. He couldn't stop thinking about it. As he neared the spot where he'd been stranded earlier, the landscape felt different. It wasn't as menacing as before. The road no longer seemed like an endless stretch of isolation, it felt almost inviting. John parked the SUV at the side, his heart racing with anticipation. The moment his feet hit the ground, a familiar voice called out, "Mister." It was the boy, Lucas, standing in the same spot as before, his bright eyes filled with curiosity. "You back?" John hesitated for a moment, still trying to figure out what exactly he was doing there. "Yeah, I'm back," he said, stepping forward, his voice softer this time. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Well, I don't know what it is. But I've been thinking about what you did. You didn't want anything for it. No one does that." Lucas shrugged, looking up at John with a mixture of innocence and wisdom. "It was no big deal," he said with a small grin. "I just helped." John's chest tightened. "No, it was a big deal," he said, almost pleading. "You didn't ask for anything in return. You just helped because you could. That's rare." He paused, swallowing hard, his thoughts racing. "I need to do something for you. For your family." Lucas glanced back at his mother, standing just behind him, watching with quiet amusement. She gave a slight nod, as if approving of the conversation. Lucas turned back to John, his eyes thoughtful. "Maybe there is one thing you can do," he said slowly, as if considering the offer carefully. John leaned in, hopeful. "Anything," he said quickly, his voice earnest. "Whatever you need, I want to help." Lucas looked at his mother once more, then turned back to John, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "All right then," he said, stepping aside to reveal his mother standing nearby, her hands folded calmly in front of her. "She's making breakfast. You can stay for that, if you want." John blinked in surprise. It wasn't much, a simple offer. but it struck him deeply. "I'd be honored," he replied, a smile tugging at his lips. They sat down together at a small kitchen table. The air was warm, filled with the simple, homely aroma of scrambled eggs and toast. Lucas's mother smiled gently at him as she placed a plate in front of him. John stared at the food for a moment, then met her eyes. He hadn't expected to find warmth in such an ordinary setting, but it was there, so palpable that it almost took his breath away. "Thank you," he said quietly, unsure of what else to say. "No need to thank us," she replied, her voice warm but steady. "It's just a meal." But for John, it was something more. It was a glimpse into a life he hadn't known he was missing. The connection, the simplicity, the genuine care, it was more than anything his wealth had ever provided him. And for the first time in a long while, he felt something stir inside him, a sense of purpose he had forgotten. Something that wasn't tied to the power he wielded, or the wealth he'd accumulated, but to something real, something meaningful. As he ate, John's gaze shifted between Lucas and his mother, feeling a quiet, yet profound shift within himself. Maybe, just maybe, this was what he had been searching for all along. Not money, not status, but this kind of connection. The days following that quiet breakfast felt different to John. Every moment in the house now seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Like something unspoken had been set in motion. He couldn't shake the image of Lucas. That young boy with the kind of self-assurance that made him question everything he thought he knew about the world. He had helped him without asking for anything in return, and in doing so, had unknowingly opened John's eyes to a world beyond his own. It was a Tuesday afternoon when John decided to visit again. This time, however, he wasn't just seeking answers to his own discomfort, he was seeking something deeper, something that felt more important than the endless meetings and boardrooms he had once thought were his only purpose. He arrived with a sense of quiet resolve. The drive to the modest house somehow less long, as though the distance between them had shrunk. When he pulled up, Lucas was sitting on the porch, his legs casually stretched out, watching the birds fly overhead. The boy looked up and grinned when he saw the SUV. "Back again?" Lucas asked, standing up and dusting off his jeans. John gave a small nod, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, I wanted to talk to you, well, to both of you." "Really? About what?" Lucas's voice was light, almost teasing, but there was an unmistakable spark in his eyes, as if he knew something John didn't. John took a deep breath, suddenly feeling the weight of his own words. "About how I don't understand it. How you can just give, without expecting anything in return. I've spent my whole life making sure I always get something out of it. And yet, you made me realize I've been missing something. Something real." Lucas's mother appeared in the doorway, her calm gaze settling on John. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made John feel as though she could see straight through him. "Come on in," she said, her voice warm. "We've got more than enough to share." John hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside, the familiar scent of home-cooked food welcoming him. The small house was cozy in a way his mansion could never be, intimate. Filled with the hum of life in a way that made him feel as though he was walking into a completely different world. It wasn't glamorous, but it was alive in a way that his sprawling estate felt empty. As they settled at the table, Lucas's mother, Elena, placed a fresh pot of coffee in front of him. Her movements were graceful, unhurried, like she had all the time in the world. John noticed how she took care to fold the napkins just so. How she made sure the food was arranged perfectly on the plates. It wasn't about perfection, it was about presence. Something he hadn't truly felt in years. "What do you mean by real?" she asked as she sat down across from him. Her eyes searching, as though she were peeling away the layers he had built up around himself. John paused, thinking carefully. "I've always been taught to focus on what I can gain. My whole life has been about the next deal, the next success, the next thing. And then I met Lucas, and you both. I realized that all of that, everything I thought mattered, doesn't really matter at all. It's the way you give without wanting anything in return. The way you live your life with meaning. I guess. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like I've been missing out on something that's right in front of me." Elena looked at him, her expression unreadable, and for a moment, there was silence. John's heart began to race, unsure if he had said too much or not enough. Then she nodded slowly, a knowing smile curling at the corners of her lips. It's easy to get lost in the chase for things that don't actually bring you happiness. She said softly. I think we all did. At some point, but it's the moments, the small things, the connections we make along the way. Those are what matter most. Not the wealth, not the success, but the people we help, the lives we touch. John sat back, absorbing her words. There was no judgment in her voice, only a quiet truth that he felt deep in his bones. The weight of his past life, the pursuit of more, felt suddenly hollow. In that moment, he understood something he hadn't been able to grasp before. He had spent so much time filling his life with achievements, with trophies, with luxuries, yet none of them had ever made him feel truly alive. As the meal progressed, they spoke about everything and nothing. About the simple joy of watching the sun rise over the hills. About the way the air smelled after a fresh rain. About the unspoken bond that connected them all. John found himself laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in what felt like forever. It wasn't because of any joke, but because the conversation itself, the connection, the warmth, was enough. Later, as he stood to leave, John's heart felt strangely light, like a burden had been lifted. He knew that he couldn't go back to his old life. Not entirely. There was too much now. Too much he had seen and felt to ignore it. But he also knew he couldn't stay here either. His world would pull him back, as it always did. Still, he felt a change within himself. A quiet, transformative shift. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. For everything. Elena smiled. A serene, understanding smile. It's nothing, she replied. It's just the way things should be. As John stepped out into the cool evening air, he looked back at the house, at the small, modest home filled with life. For the first time in years, he felt like he was leaving with something worth more than money. He was leaving with purpose. And that, he knew, was the most valuable thing of all. The next few weeks passed in a blur for John, each day feeling like an echo of the one before. But beneath the surface, something inside him had changed. Like the subtle shift of the tides, he found himself thinking more often about the simple truths Lucas and his mother had shared with him. Truths that seemed so far removed from the world he once inhabited. There were moments, fleeting but significant, when he would catch himself, pausing in the middle of a conversation or a meeting, realizing how hollow the pursuit of wealth and success had become. It was as though, for the first time in his life, he could see the world in full color. One afternoon, John found himself in a luxurious conference room, surrounded by the usual suspects, the executives, the lawyers, the high-powered investors, all of them entrenched in their strategy sessions. Eyes glued to their screens, their minds calculating the next big deal. But today, John's focus was elsewhere. As the others spoke, he felt like an observer rather than a participant. He wasn't angry or frustrated, no. It was something deeper, something more profound. A sense of disconnect. He was no longer enthralled by the numbers, the projections, or the promises of success that had once driven him. Then, just as the meeting seemed to reach its peak, his phone buzzed, a reminder of the invitation he had received earlier in the day. It was from Lucas. Come by when you can. There's something I want to show you. The message was short, but there was something about it. Something in the words that spoke to him. Without a second thought, John excused himself, standing up from the table, the voices of his colleagues fading as he walked out of the room. The decision felt natural, almost inevitable. He wasn't sure what Lucas wanted, but he knew it was more important than any deal. The drive back to that little house felt different this time. The roads familiar but somehow less important. As he pulled up to the house, he saw Lucas waiting for him on the porch, his figure silhouetted against the setting sun. The warmth of the day had begun to fade. The evening air cool and crisp. Lucas stood up as John approached, his usual grin on his face. But there was something in his eyes, an intensity, a knowing, that made John pause for a moment. Glad you came, Lucas said, his voice calm but charged with an underlying excitement. John gave him a small smile. You said you had something to show me? Yeah, but it's more of something to feel. Really? Lucas's words were cryptic, but John didn't question him. They walked together toward the back of the house, where a small, overgrown garden lay hidden behind a thick curtain of ivy. The garden was nothing spectacular by conventional standards, just a patch of land surrounded by a rickety wooden fence, filled with wildflowers, a few herbs, and a couple of trees. But as they stepped inside, John felt a wave of peace wash over him. An overwhelming sense of calm that he couldn't quite explain. "This is where I come when I need to clear my head," Lucas said, his voice soft, almost reverent. "It's not about what's out there in the world. It's about what's in here." He motioned to his chest. John glanced around, taking in the simple beauty of the space, the delicate sway of the flowers, the soft rustling of the leaves in the breeze. The whole scene felt almost surreal, like stepping into a world where time moved differently, where everything slowed down. "You spend time here?" John asked, genuinely curious. "Yeah, it's where I find my balance, my peace." Lucas paused, as though considering his next words carefully. "You know, the world outside always tries to pull you in, to distract you. But this is real." He gestured to the garden again, his hands sweeping over the flowers, the grass, the trees. "It's not about how much you have or how much you can control. It's about living in the moment, being present with what you have, appreciating the small things." John felt a knot tighten in his chest. His life had been a constant pursuit of more money, more power, more success. He had always believed that if he could just achieve enough, he would finally feel fulfilled. But standing there, in that garden, surrounded by the quiet hum of nature, he realized how empty that chase had been. There was something infinitely more meaningful here, in this space, something he hadn't been able to see until now. "I don't know how to explain it," John said, his voice quieter than usual. "But I feel different. Like I've been running towards something my whole life, only to realize it's not out there. It's right here. Isn't it?" Lucas smiled, his eyes lighting up with understanding. "Exactly. It's about being here, about finding what's already in front of you. You've been searching for answers in places that don't matter. What matters is how you choose to live each moment. The rest comes when you stop chasing it." John looked at the sky above, the fading light turning everything a soft golden hue. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of peace settle deep within him. No longer burdened by the need to accumulate, to prove himself. He felt free. This wasn't the life he had envisioned for himself, but perhaps it was the one he had needed all along. He turned to Lucas, a sense of gratitude swelling inside him. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "For showing me this." Lucas nodded, his expression simple but sincere. "You don't need to thank me. You already have everything you need. You just have to choose to see it." As John left the garden that evening, the world outside felt different, quieter, more manageable. For the first time, he wasn't racing toward the future. He was living in the present, and that was enough. The days that followed were a blur of quiet reflection and unspoken shifts. John couldn't explain it, but something inside him had been irrevocably altered. He still went through the motions, attending meetings, checking emails, making decisions, but it all felt distant now. Like he was moving through a world that no longer fit him. His old life, the one that had once been his entire universe, began to feel like an ill-fitting suit, one that he had outgrown without even realizing it. Every conversation about stock prices or business strategies seemed irrelevant, like background noise to a song he no longer cared to hear. Then, one morning, John found himself standing in front of his office building, staring up at the glass and steel facade that had once symbolized his success. The towering structure seemed to mock him now. Its cold, polished exterior a reminder of everything he had spent years chasing, and yet it was empty. As if on instinct, he turned and walked away. No destination in mind, just a need to escape the suffocating weight of it all. He ended up at a small cafe he used to visit years ago. A place where the barista knew his name and his usual order. The smell of freshly brewed coffee greeted him, wrapping him in warmth as the familiar sounds of clinking mugs and low conversations buzzed in the background. Sitting by the window, John watched the world go by, each person caught in their own rush, absorbed in their own battles. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to join them. He simply watched, content with the stillness that seemed to have taken root in him. It was then that his phone buzzed, another message from Lucas. "Come over when you're free. I think you're ready for the next step." The words sent a ripple of curiosity through him. He had no idea what Lucas meant, but there was no hesitation now. Without a second thought, John paid for his coffee, stood up, and walked out the door. Driving to Lucas's house felt different this time, more purposeful. Like he was heading towards something important. something he had been unknowingly waiting for. When he arrived, Lucas was already waiting for him, standing by the porch, as calm and centered as ever. "I think you're starting to see it now," Lucas said, his voice full of quiet conviction. There was no need for more words. Without another sound, he led John down a narrow path at the back of his house. A path John had never noticed before, lined with trees that seemed to beckon him forward. The moment they entered, the air felt different, charged, as though something powerful was about to happen. They stopped at the foot of a large oak tree, its branches sprawling in every direction. Lucas turned to him, his eyes holding a deep understanding. "This tree," he said softly, "has been here longer than either of us. It's weathered storms, seasons, and time itself, but it doesn't fight against the changes. It adapts, it grows, it finds new ways to stretch toward the light, even when the world around it seems dark." John stood in silence, letting the words sink in, feeling the weight of them settle in his chest. He had spent so many years fighting against everything, against time, against change, against his own dissatisfaction, and it had never brought him peace. Now, standing before this ancient tree, he understood. True growth didn't come from control, it came from acceptance, from allowing himself to bend, to shift, and to grow alongside the changing winds of life. Lucas smiled, as if he knew the exact moment John's realization had taken root. "You've been trying so hard to hold everything together, to keep everything in place. But life doesn't work that way. It's about flow. It's about moving with the current, not against it." John's heart pounded in his chest as the truth unfolded before him like a map, revealing a path he had never thought to take. He had been clinging to a vision of success, of control, of perfection. But those things, those relentless pursuits, had never brought him the peace he truly craved. It was the simple, quiet moments, the stillness, the connection, the natural rhythm of life, that held the answers. As Lucas spoke, John's mind raced with possibilities, with a future that didn't depend on status or wealth, but on something far more profound. The choices he had made, the mistakes he had learned from, and the journey he had taken were all part of the bigger picture. A picture that was only now beginning to come into focus. When Lucas finished speaking, he didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. The silence between them was heavy, but it was the kind of silence that spoke volumes. John felt something shift within him, something deep and transformative. The man he had once been, the one constantly seeking validation, success, and control, was slipping away, and in his place was someone new, someone willing to embrace the uncertainty, the messiness, and the beauty of life as it came. "Thank you," John whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He had no words to fully express what he felt, but in that moment, he didn't need to. Lucas had already shown him what he needed to see, the strength to bend, to grow, and to finally live for himself. Life isn't about clinging to control or perfection. True growth comes from embracing change, adapting to life's uncertainties, and finding peace in the process. Let go of the pursuit of validation and success. What matters most is the journey of self-discovery and connection with the present moment. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more insightful stories and life-changing lessons. Stay with us for the journey ahead.